John Donovan, Oceanside, California. Marty Keller here, Sacramento, California. We're West Coast boys.
West Coast boys, glad to be alive.
Exactly. What do you want to talk about today, John?
Well, my main topic is accountability.
Right.
The
what
process
about accountability?
Owning your the end results of your life that are frustrating, irritating, agitating, otherwise annoying. And whatever that is, however you perceive it, is a direct result of information in that created the results where you find yourself. And for me, it was easy when I started because I could own, I'm an alcoholic. I use alcohol to avoid feeling, or to avoid life. Actually, I didn't know there was such a thing as feeling. And that started me on a different journey. That one statement, hi, my name is John, I'm an alcoholic. And then I've come to see that anything that I resist owning, like a character defect, because I want to be a good person, is actually the doorway to freedom. In the acceptance of where I find myself, owning it, saying it out loud as my truth, as my creation, like I'm mean. One of the things I found, even when I quit drinking, is that I was mean. So when I owned I'm mean, something happened internally, and my thought was to be kind, to find out how to be kind. And so over the years, I learned about the word intent and incorporated it in the accountability process. So if I own I'm mean, which is in alignment with what happened to me as a child, teenager, 20s, 30s, I can go on and on, about where I accumulated it, owning it created a resonance inside my body that felt in alignment or true, even though that's not what I wanted to be. That alignment and owning it actually tapped into the experience I had that offered me the best opportunity to survive, was to be mean. It worked. I had survived. Although I was beset with many problems, miserable, I put on an era of I'm okay, and found myself isolated, alone, fearful of other people, social anxiety. And this process has brought me back. That's what I want to talk about. In whatever form it takes, any topic, all roads lead to Rome. So whatever we discuss, my ability to introspect is vital to my growth.
Well, over the last couple of weeks, I've been threatening to re-raise the question of what we call the accountability principles, as perhaps a doorway to exploring the process, the value, the energetics of accountability. And okay. So if you're open to it, I'm going to throw them up on the screen here.
Okay.
So that those watching can join us. And so just for those who might be here for the first time, there are different groups that get together and practice this work, this accountability practice here in Sacramento. Our group work here has evolved, and we call it the Rusty Nail Club. And that's just based on a joke that one of us told about an old hound dog that sat around groaning and moaning, sitting on a nail, and his owner said he doesn't get off it because it doesn't hurt enough yet. So we often find that we would rather stay in a pain we know than let it go and to face what we fear might be a worse pain, even though our experiences, there's actually something incredibly more powerful and wonderful once we get off the nail. So these principles are principles that we developed here in our work here, but they are applicable, I think, to all accountability practices, all accountability group work. And John, the first one that we put under, we sort of made it a general principle, which is there's nothing wrong.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong. So the person coming to this for the first time probably would say, what?
Yeah.
All the stuff in my life is wrong and it's broken and needs to be fixed.
Right. I would, yeah, there's nothing wrong, and it may be painful, it may be annoying, and it's not wrong. It's simply in alignment with my experience. It may hurt, absolutely, but to couch it as right or wrong blocks access to relief. And it's in one of the principles, what I resist persists. And we'll get to that one as we go through.
Let's I want to dig into this one a little bit more if you're open.
Yeah.
Because the primary avenue to the moral, spiritual, mental, physical health that we're seeking to create for ourselves is through the feeling body. We've talked about that on this podcast many times, and we may talk about it again from time to time. So I just invite the newcomer to notice that when I say there's something wrong, I'm actually engaging a belief system that I have that's in my subconscious mind that is determining what's good, what's bad, what's right, what's wrong, in a way that I may not be aware of at all.
Right.
It's just, it's part of my defense mechanism. We've been talking about that. So one of the reasons that we invite folks to consider there's nothing wrong, it's one way of noticing the mind's commitment to parsing things as right or wrong, and that those statements that come out of our subconscious actually often have the impact of shutting down feeling.
Yeah.
So if I'm judging something in my life that I shouldn't have done that, or what kind of idiot am I, or those kinds of statements, those kinds of judging, making me wrong statements, the real strategy of that stuff is to pull me out of feeling. Yeah. And again, nothing's wrong with that. As you just said, that's in complete alignment with my experience as a young kid in my family of origin.
And that let me qualify that strategy is subconscious. It's correct. Below the level of consciousness. So it's a strategy that's working internally without my having to ask it to work. It's working for my benefit. It is showing me that there's something that hurt before that I need to be aware of. Just like the reflex, if you touch something hot after having been burnt, your hand automatically moves backward. You don't have to think, I want to move it backward. And so what we're doing is doing this response, internal subconscious response. And if it happened to be my hand and I pull it back, I don't call my hand stupid. I don't refer to it as a stupid move. It was simply a reaction for my survival, for my safety. And when this survival mechanism gets hooked into the nuances of relationship instead of actual life-threatening situations, like somebody coming at me with a knife or me getting burnt, which is painful, this mechanism inside us doesn't equivocate to where if I told, my experience was me being spontaneous and joyful meant that I pissed somebody off, then my ability to be spontaneous and joyful is dampened by this mechanism so that I won't put myself in a position to get hurt again, all below my consciousness, which is why they say in the 12 steps, this is a cunning, baffling, powerful disease. When I say for 30 years that I don't want to drink, and I find myself at home on the couch with a beer in my hand day after day after day, this is what I'm talking about. That internal mechanism wants to keep me alive, and the way, or keep me, to survive. And the way I survived was to numb myself. As a child, I simply went into the freeze mode and went away from my feeling body because it was too painful. As an adult, the avenue I found for that numbing for me was alcohol. And as much as I didn't want to drink at times, there were times I didn't care. When I didn't want to drink, I found myself drinking anyway. It's like addressing that question, have I ever faced an issue that a decision that I knew I would regret, and a little voice in my head said, stop, don't do that. And I found that I couldn't or wouldn't stop that, whatever that decision was. This is the mechanism we're talking about. Nothing wrong refers to the misinformation is guiding my action. This information is enlisted for my welfare, albeit untrue. My body believes it as true. And again, below my conscious level. And any rationalization of I need to fix this, or it needs to go away, or I need to use my willpower, confronts this mechanism, and it just locks down on the pattern in my best interest, for my best interest. So the accountability process leads me directly to that feeling tone. And in that feeling tone, in that frequency, like I'm an alcoholic, something comes internally, bubbles up from internal, and my next move is simply to go back to a meeting. I don't have to think about it. I just know I'm coming back. And it's not rational. It's not logical. And the action coming from that truth is what me owning the truth, I'm an alcoholic, validated that mechanism. It's like, yeah, I'm really looking out for you. So yeah, we're on the right page. And I was in a room full of people who didn't judge or blame, and simply accepted my truth and welcomed me, and I moved into it.
Well, I was going to say that point that you just made is the second value of this nothing's wrong principle, because we come into this work with a subconscious belief, not only that there's something wrong, but usually that subconscious belief takes the form of I'm wrong.
Right.
I'm a mistake. I am flawed irredeemably. And so when you come into a space where you hear nothing's wrong, you're also hearing you're not wrong. You're right. You're perfect way you are. And that's something that we did not hear as children. Or if we heard it, it was offered then taken back.
Yes.
And so we felt whipsawed between nice parents and mean parents. And so we just had to form some kind of defense, but it was all based on a subconscious, we use the word belief, but a little kid doesn't even believe yet. So it's just a reaction, a subconscious reaction that there's something wrong with me.
Right.
And so the nothing's wrong is not only an accurate statement of reality in general, but it's also a loving statement to particularly the newcomer who is bringing in on his or her shoulders the invisible little devil saying, "You're wrong, you're flawed, you screwed up, you can't do it right, you're never going to be happy," whatever. The list of the things that our internal critic tells us is pretty endless.
Mm-hmm.
So nothing's wrong has that value. And then, as you said, in the group practice, we're sitting among a group of people who don't see us as flawed, who see us as perfectly fine.
Yes.
And that's also communicated at a vibrational level as well as a spoken level.
And we also, I recognize woundedness in the other people. We had something in common. We had the end result of dysfunction, like afraid of authority figures, saw criticism as a threat in common. Even though we came from separate areas of life, we had that in common based on the information given to us in our childhood in the form of trauma or dismissing or ignoring or diminishing vocabulary or language that was used in the house. A need to get it right. I remember with my children thinking that if they did something wrong, somebody would see me as a bad parent. So my goal into getting them to do it right was actually for me to look good, had nothing to do with their welfare. So I passed on. I didn't see my kids. My parents didn't see me. They saw somebody that reflected them, and they had to look good through me.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Let's go on to I think all the principles flow from "there's nothing wrong."
Yeah, I agree.
So the next one, and we touched on this a little bit last week, I'm always getting what I want. And there's what I've seen time and time again in the group practice, particularly for the newcomer, is this one bewilders people. And yet, when we work through the workbook that you generated for this work, John, the very first item is on what do I want?
Yep.
So would you address this? I'm always getting what I want, and specifically in wanting, the power of desire in general.
Yeah. I would always say I want to be a good person, but internally I felt unworthy. So, or I felt not deserving. And so when somebody in my life would dismiss me or not hear me, I would say, that's not what I want. But we're talking about the subconscious directive to keep myself safe, which is I need to take the victim place because that's where I'm safest. So if I guess there's a story. I was arguing with my ex-wife, and she said in one point of the argument, she goes, you want me to call you crazy. And I said, no, that's crazy. I don't want you to call me crazy. So we argued some more, and then she just blurted it out. She goes, okay, John, you're crazy. And a little voice in my head, I heard this distinctly, said, see, told you. So what I wanted subconsciously was for her to call me crazy. Then I could not have to endure the pain of the relationship. So if she saw me as crazy, she would go away and it wouldn't be my fault. It would be her making the decision instead of me saying, this is not working for me. So what I wanted was for her to see me as crazy so she would not want to be with me.
Right.
And that was a blinding flash of the obvious. It's like, I'm always getting what I want subconsciously. And if I know that, again, owning the character defects or the posturing to be seen as crazy is the end of the posturing to be seen as crazy. And now when somebody looks at me with respect and regard, that's what I want. I may not be used to it. At first, I wasn't used to it. And that's what I was asking for now, because I respected myself by telling the truth. and I held myself in high regard, that had value and could own their shortcomings, character defects.
I have a picture I want to throw up on the screen to help us think about this. I'm always getting what I want,
Okay.
and that's this. So
That's a
one of
really
the
cool picture.
one of the things that I actually learned from you, John, was that our consciousness is divided into direct consciousness and subconsciousness,
Yep.
and that the mind is mostly operating in the subconscious realm, just like an iceberg. So
Mhm.
this is a graphic illustration of the way consciousness is structured. And so one of the things that we share with folks in the meetings is that when we say, I'm always getting what I want, if in my conscious mind, I'm getting something I say I don't want, but it continues to show up anyway, then my clue is to take a look at and see if I can discover it in my subconscious mind.
Yes.
Because if you look at that piece of ice and think of the specific gravity that it has, the center of gravity of that iceberg is way, way, way below the surface.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the attractive power of that entire mass. That little part above the water just doesn't have enough mass to attract what it wants for itself. That's
Right.
why this is happening almost in the same way that gravity works in physics. This is happening in the psychological world. That when, and you said it earlier, you said, well, if have I ever been prepared to take a decision I knew I shouldn't take and I took it anyway? That's because something in that subconscious wanted that instead of the subconscious object.
Yes. And the subconscious is where our survival mechanism is working. And we're fortunate that it's there because it doesn't rely on judgment or feeling. It simply responds.
Or does it? And it doesn't rely on being paid attention to.
Right. Yeah. It acts in my best interest according to what it's experienced. And if it's experienced trauma, it actually recreates the situation for the trauma so that it maintains survival. It's like insidious.
Well, it's insidious to us as adults, but
yeah.
again, using your very terms, it's totally appropriate to the level on which it was created.
Yes, exactly. The way to reframe that pool of information, that 7/8 of that iceberg, is through my experience, there's probably more than one way. Ownership of the end result. What is the end result of my total consciousness? And we're talking mostly, and I want to be clear, that it's patterns of behavior that I consciously want to change and find that I'm stuck in them. They're not patterns of behavior that are working for me or that are beneficial or that create connection or that are appropriate for my well-being. They're patterns of behavior that I specifically have issue with. Mine happen to be alcohol, avoidance of relationship issues, inability to connect on a feeling, loving connection with anybody, my wife, my children, my friends. So that's what we're talking about. This is not all inclusive. There are parts of me in my alcoholism and in my dysfunction that were cool, that were part of who I am. So we're talking specifically about behaviors that are a nuisance, are patterns, destructive, and they lead to destruction or separation.
I want to make a comment on desire.
Yeah.
So desire, I'm always getting what I want. I think it's also important as we learn to love ourselves and accept the way this is the way our lives and our physiology and our psychology are structured, that we might be willing to recognize that desire is a fundamental attractor, because desire is intimately related with survival. I want to live.
Mm-hmm.
And so the organism is always wanting something, whether we're conscious of it or not. We're always wanting something that's bringing us not just survival, but human beings are uniquely blessed with the capability of creating thriving.
Yes.
And so the wanting is it's just natural. It's part of the deal. You can't not want. You can't divorce yourself from desire. It's just like you can't divorce yourself from breathing. It's part of our soul to desire something to be going on in our lives.
Yeah.
We are creative beings, and so we want to be creating something.
That desire, that longing, is the rocket fuel for manifestation. They say, and when I know several people say it, but I saw it in The Secret, that thoughts become things. Well, yeah, they do. And the thing I long for manifests sooner. It's when you attach the feeling element to a longing or a desire, that is a creative force. It actually sends out a signal for the universe to manifest this, put it in form, whether it's a relationship or a house, whatever it is.
A Maserati.
A Maserati. Within reason. Like if I had the desire to be an NBA pro basketball player, I'd probably unrealistic. But it comes from internally with me, and it's in alignment with me. The dysfunction or the trauma interrupts that about what I want. It interferes with my authentic longing. And it puts me in a place of needing to please people or not hurt people or watch my P's and Q's or watch out for the axe in the back that is no longer there. It was there in my childhood, that trauma was inflicted in my childhood, and it's no longer here, but my body, that part of me doesn't know that. It's simply acting on the information it was giving and seated in that survival mechanism. And it's the conscious part, that little part above the water, that works to reframe. The process of the accountability tree is that we start from the end result and work backwards. And the end result is I'm mean. Well, that's in alignment with the information internally that I want to project meanness because people leave me alone. And that's my goal. That's what I want. Just leave me alone. Unless, of course, I want to talk to you, then of course you should talk, which convolutes everything. So if I own I'm mean, I get a constellation of frequency, feeling, memories, and then I interject in there, it is my intent to be kind. That is the new directive. It goes back down into my subconscious, and my experience was I found myself being less mean, or noticing when I was mean and taking a breath and repeating, it is my intent to be kind. And over a period of time, I became capable of kindness in any situation. And that's the I want to say magic of the accountability tree. It's not magic. It's actually logical attention to self-love, holding myself in high regard, and acceptance of how I'm made, like the biology of how I'm made, and using it. I'm creating in my life different avenues for this message out of thin air. People come to me and say, "Do you want?" Yeah, I want. and I'm around people who are like-minded, and it's happening around me, and it's directly in connection with the alignment inside me that says this is not okay, that people don't know this. This is not okay, that people are struggling without any recourse, and I want to offer this information to them. They can do what they want with it. I simply want to offer the information.
So I'd just like to summarize this principle. I'm always getting what I want. The first thing we learn in our childhood is that we want to feel safe and connected. And so whatever our experience is, that's what little Marty or little John or whoever is seeking to experience.
Yes.
And so if, as I did, we grew up in a dysfunctional family, then the safety element will lead to behaviors in my adult life which no longer conform to the actual circumstances of my life. And I will continue to act out to do things like you said earlier. For me, it's very similar. Push people away if they get too close. Love is dangerous, and I don't want to be in danger. These are all subconscious experiences below that waterline until we do the work to bring them into consciousness, where we can now, as you said, we can make a new decision, we can make a new choice. And now we can direct our desiring capability to desire whatever it is we say out loud. I intend to create a world of joy, peace, freedom, and community. That desire is now back in my working in my subconscious, dealing with the little part of me that says, no, I want to be left all alone. And not in a conflicting kind of way, but in a loving kind of way. It's like the desire for joy, peace, freedom, and community does not negate the desire for staying safe. It just starts to change the environment within which it's existing.
Yes.
So I don't find my need to be safe by keeping myself alone in conflict with my adult desire, my current day desire to live freely, joyfully, peacefully, and in community with people. It can sound like magic, like you said earlier, because I don't have any kind of electron microscope to go inside myself and watch how this process works. I can just tell you it works because, like you said, the results start being different.
Yes. That's the demonstration of the effectiveness of being accountable or owning my character defects.
Exactly.
Cool. Very cool.
I'd say amen.
Yeah.
So our next principle, kind of interesting. We've only implied how this one works, and maybe we can get into this more deeply. It's never about the other person.
Yeah.
Or maybe we should start with the one below that. The issue's not the issue. Which one do you think we should start with?
Either one.
Okay.
Let's stay with it's never about the other person.
Okay.
And whatever I'm feeling, or my perception, or my conclusion of whatever situation I find myself in, is totally mine. I'm drawing it from my experience. If I'm not in whatever event at the level of the event, let's say I'm at a situation where I'm talking to somebody and the tension level is at a 5. If I'm interacting with that person and staying at that 5 and addressing whatever problem or topic we have, I'm in my life. So it's never about the other person is when my intensity rises above the level of the situation. So if the situation is a 5 and I go to 8, that's about me. That's about something inside me that sees this as different than it is, what the reality of it is. Or if I go below and I'm apathetic or I walk away, that's about me. So my issue and then we get into the second one too, but whatever I say is the problem is about me. If I'm addressing and being proactive and moving towards resolution, that's me engaged in my life. It may be difficult, it may be stressful, it may be all that, and I'm dealing with life on life's terms. So it's never about the other person, is about my response, whether it's intense, more intense or less intense. My perception is totally mine. Now that I'm talking about it, even in the 5, my perception of the situation is coming from my experience. The other person's perception is coming from their experience. If we're both in a place where we feel safe and have done some work, we can engage and resolve the issue. And the goal is to resolve the issue, not to stay in the issue. This keeps me in no resolution. It's about they're assholes, and that is not about the other person. It's about me.
Yeah, so that I appreciate that you said that last thing, because what you're saying might sound a little abstract to the newcomer. So I was going to say, let's get down and dirty, and let's talk about triggering. Let's talk about, okay, my wife comes home, my partner comes home, and says something, and I go, well, that's stupid, and I feel some kind of emotional jolt.
Mm-hmm.
Like we might call it stress, we might call it anxiety. It doesn't matter what the word is, but we use the term triggered. I was perfectly okay. Then she came home and said something, and I got aroused.
Yeah.
In anger or defensiveness or whatever.
Yeah.
And I'm trained in my family of origin to say that person caused me to feel this way.
Yes.
And it's never about the other person, is alerting us to the fact that nobody can cause me to feel any way.
Correct.
That there's something inside, again, back in that iceberg, underneath the water surface, there's something going on. There's something down there that's assuming this situation is the same as the situation that I faced as a 1-year-old, a 2-year-old, where right. I could not see myself as a player here, so it had to be about the other person.
Yeah.
Am I getting that right?
You got it. You made me angry. You made me scream. If it wasn't for you, I wouldn't have. And my response, whether it's screaming, yelling, or simply saying, I didn't hear what you said, is all about me. It tells me everything I need to know about me.
So how do we?
It may or may not be true about the other person.
Right.
But we don't know that until we ask. That's
right.
an assumption until we ask the other person to verify or validate. You froze for about 5 seconds.
Welcome back.
Okay. So,
so I wanted to talk about this triggering, if I can, and because in effect, this process can become a gold mine.
Yes.
So my experience when I first started working with you in the accountability group that you were facilitating, we would often check in and talk about situations going on in our lives. And since we were new to this work, and I will just own it for myself, I didn't get this. It's never about the other person.
Right.
And so I would say to you, but he did this, or he behaved this way, or he acted this way, and it pissed me off.
Yeah.
And then you would say something to the effect of, can you go into that feeling? Can you recall that feeling when that moment, what happened? And then that feeling, could you recall what your indictment of the other person was? And that's my word. You don't use fancy words like that, but
right.
And I would say, well, the guy was a liar.
Yeah.
And then you would say, are you willing to consider the possibility that you're a liar? And
Yeah.
that taught me two things. Number one, first of all, it generated that response that you talked about at the beginning of the podcast, that feeling of my body saying, the truth is finally coming out. I am a liar.
Yeah.
And then number two, it's simultaneously I'm learning about projection, which is to say, I'm seeing in the other person the hidden indictment of myself. That for whatever reason, Jung says it's because we can't handle it. I can only see it out there. I can't see it in myself, because to bear it in myself would yield that feeling that I actually got when I said, I'm willing to say I'm a liar. And even right now, I say this to you, John, and I still feel that energy of, ugh, because the truth is I am a liar.
Yeah.
I still tell lies, but I don't blame or judge myself anymore. That's what I had to learn. That goes all the way up to nothing's wrong. And so it's never about the other person as a gateway to that gold mine for me of seeing all of the stuff that's been hidden in the bottom part of that iceberg in my subconscious, and being able to see it without making it wrong, and just to be able to own it and ultimately move toward loving it, because it's who I am.
Yes.
And there's nothing wrong with me.
Yeah. And when I had you on, I don't know if it was specifically that I'm a liar, you felt that truth of that statement. And then I led you into, what do you want that's different?
Right.
And that point of recognizing where you're at, and then saying, oh, it is my intent to be honest, or is my intent to be truthful, or is my intent to be trustworthy, address that little child's need to lie to stay safe. I mean, one of the things I knew about my children is that I didn't expect them to tell me the truth based on what the consequences were. I mean, I understood that it would be in their best interest to get me to buy a lie. And I would call them out on it, but I was punitive in my actions before I knew all this. And I understood that them lying was in their best interest. And this is before my recovery. And when I owned I'm a liar, I got it that I lied so much that I started believing the lies. And most of the lies were about myself. Had well, I don't say nothing to do with the other person, but me lying became normalized. I would find myself making up stories, knowing I'm making up the story, wondering why don't I just say what happened? It is yeah.
Well, the other point though is what you just reminded me of, and what you said is that I may have a trigger when somebody's lying to me, and I may have this condemnatory energy, and it's about me. But as you said earlier, it doesn't mean the other person isn't lying.
Right.
It's not about that. It's because it's not about the other person. The other person may indeed be engaging in these behaviors that we don't like, but the trigger. So again, the thing where you said, if I'm at the same energy level, emotional energy level of the person I'm with,
Yeah.
then I'm in a place where we can do business, whatever that is. But if
Right.
I shoot up here, I'm no longer in communion with you, and now I'm into my own thing. That's the way I understood you saying that.
Yeah.
And so the trigger doesn't mean that this person isn't sitting there lying to my face.
Right.
If you're lying on my face and I'm not triggered about it, I can handle that.
Yeah.
I can say, quit lying.
Right. Simply.
Or would you please tell the truth?
Yeah. Or I don't believe you.
Right. Whatever. But the minute this happens, and I like the fact that you also said, or I could just move into withdrawal, freeze, instead of fight. I could just do flight, whatever.
When you were talking about lying, what came to me was hearing my mother say, I love you, and feeling that I was defective somehow based in her perception of me. So that's another level of lie that I don't want to hear. I don't, it's like the resentment that created, and this is all subconscious, in me listening to my mother or somebody, my dad, after they'd been specifically violent or mean and saying things, well, I'm doing this because I love you. It's like, no, no, no. I can do it now. I can say, no, screw you. That's a lie. As a child, I didn't have that recourse, so I had to stuff it. And then when somebody lied to me in my adulthood, that energy would come up, and it was on, or it was done, or it was over, or I caused separation and fear.
I'd like to share a story with you. I don't know if I've ever shared this with you, or I don't, or hopefully I haven't said this on this podcast before. If you've heard this before, forgive me. But one of the turning points of my whole life was when I was in my early 30s and I'd moved to California, and I would talk to my dad on a regular basis, and he would always end the phone call saying, I love you. And I had that same energetic reactions, like, you know, I'd say to myself, you liar. You're only saying that because you have to say that. You're my dad.
Yeah.
And then one day I had the grace to say to my dad, I don't believe you. And he said, I'm so glad you told me that. And in that moment, I knew he was telling the truth.
Yes.
Because I felt it.
Yeah.
It was like, I can't explain this, John, and maybe you understand this, but my life went like this. By virtue of, I summoned up the courage to talk to him at the level we were at, to say, I don't believe you. That was the truth for me.
Right.
And then he was willing to say, I love you enough to let you tell me you don't believe I love you.
Yeah.
I was like, whoa, I didn't see that one coming for 1,000 miles, or however far away Detroit is from San Francisco.
Yeah. That was the same validation that the accountability tree gives me.
Exactly.
So when I'm validated by somebody, if I had the opportunity to go to my mother and say, Mom, you're not really loving like everybody thinks, you're really mean, and she would have said, yeah, I know, John, I'm sorry. It would have flipped me on my head too. It didn't happen. Only now I give that to myself.
Correct.
And it's in that accountability process. It's the truth, emotion, I intend, and the next line down is self-validation. It's validating years of held resentment that, yeah, I get it. Yeah, that's true. That did happen to you. And it's relieving, and it opens up, like turned on your head. For me, it says it opens up a whole new world that I wasn't privy to the moment before.
Right. And it also mirrored, although I didn't understand it at the time, it mirrored for me the power of telling the truth for myself.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So we have time for, I think, for one more, and it's parallel to the one that we were just talking about. So we were talking about, it's never about the other person, and a larger version of that in a different kind of way is the issue is not the issue.
Yeah. Whatever I deem as the problem, if it is not resolved in either the moment or soon after, or if I'm not identifying the issue and then moving to resolution, and I bring up that issue again, I'm suspect that there's something in me that's not looking at something or not listening. If I revisit an issue the third time, it is me. There's something I'm not looking at. The issue is never the issue refers to anything that I'm stuck in a loop about or in a recurring argument. I used to say in my recovery and my shares that in my relationships, the first argument I had with a woman was the same argument I had with her when the door hit me in the ass. So that's where I get the issue, never the issue. There was something I didn't know, didn't see, didn't own in myself that wasn't about her or about the relationship. It was about me.
Right.
And it was a part of that subconscious wanting separation, and especially in significant relationships, love relationships, the family of origin trauma is reenacted. It's like if I say I love you, then I'm buying into everything that happened to me when my mom said I love you. And that was untenable subconsciously. So as soon as I did the I do or I love you, stuff started coming up that was unreasonable. And yet I said, okay, here we go again. I got another one that's like lying to me, or she tricked me, or she wants something from me. And all those things were true about my mom. They weren't true about the woman that was with me. Or may have been, I didn't have the wherewithal to check it out.
Sure. One of the ways that I've identified this in my own life is when I find myself complaining.
Mhm.
When I find myself complaining, I'm in the issues, not the issue. I'm directing energy towards something outside of me as being the cause of something inside of me.
Yep.
Earlier we said that it's never about the other person. Well, it's also not about the situation that I'm saying is causing me a problem. So I often hear in group meetings people complaining about their jobs, complaining about the price of this or that, the other thing, complaining about the president, complaining about the governor, complaining about COVID, whatever it is. It doesn't mean that those things aren't problems.
Right.
But if it's causing me energy that's keeping me stuck, then there's something again in that subconscious mind that's seeking some kind of attention, some kind of relief, some kind of action. That again, that's where the gold is. If I'm willing to take a look at that, and the process, correct me if I'm wrong, but the process is similar to the one we discussed, and it's not about the other person, which is, okay, so what is it that you're saying about the situation?
Mm-hmm.
And then work from there. What's the indictment of the problem?
Mm-hmm.
What are you seeing out there, and what's your condemnatory, judgmental statement about it?
Yes.
And then, are you willing to consider that you are whatever, fill in the blank?
Yeah.
And then, and how does that make you feel when you say that?
Right. What is the feeling that arises? Yeah. My when I find myself in the third, and I wish it was only three sometimes, when I find myself in a loop, what works for me is that, again, this is my control. This is my need to control the outside. Instead of accepting what is, I'm trying to change what happened. And that's an aspect of control. It could be an aspect of neediness. Usually for me, when I'm going over a process more than 3 times and worrying or complaining or wondering at the audacity of the person, it's about control. And when I simply say I'm controlling, there's relief, and I can now move to resolution. I can say, this is what I'm going to do when I see this guy. I'm going to be accountable. When I get back there, I'll revisit it. But the movement towards resolution is the end result of the issue, is never the issue. And that's my goal, is to stay and being proactive instead of reactive. And my focusing on something over and over and over shows me something about myself that's still unresolved or unhealed inside me.
Right. And in the world of there's nothing wrong, I can take a look at that information and determine what I want to do instead. What and I may want to, I'm willing to give myself permission to stay stuck and angry or whatever. I mean, there's no wrong choice.
Right.
It's what the goal here is, conscious choice.
Exactly. And there's nothing wrong. I want to say this again. I said it at the beginning. Doesn't mean this isn't painful.
Right.
It doesn't mean that it's not conflicting. It doesn't mean that it's not confusing. It doesn't mean that it creates sadness or separation. It does all that. To judge it as wrong stops the availability for resolution.
Another way that I say it is that nothing's wrong does not repeal the law of karma.
Correct. Yeah.
There's still going to be consequences for my choices.
Exactly.
And that's just the way the world is.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm willing to own that there's nothing wrong with the fact that there are consequences to any choice.
Yeah, the way I say it is I get to enjoy the consequences of my behavior.
Exactly.
And by enjoy means I can use it to change, or I can use it to stay stuck.
Exactly.
Those are my consequences. And the gaining of wisdom comes from the realization of a mistake, but not the realization that I am bad wrong. The connection to the behavior as who we are is part of this. The issue is never the issue. If I attach to my avoidant behavior, or my lying, or I'm a liar and I want to hide it, I am not my behaviors. My behaviors come from information that I've collected over my lifetime. The end result behavior is simply in alignment with the information inside me. When I own the behaviors as an action coming from internal misinformation, I am not shaming or blaming myself. I am taking accountability. I am accounting. I have the ability to account for that behavior as in alignment. The alignment gets changed when I'm doing this process, because if I own I'm mean, it's in alignment with my experience. It is my intent to be kind and caring. And then I demonstrate that by behaviors that are kind and caring, understanding, listening instead of talking over. These are all demonstrations of a shift internal.
As we keep our eye on the newcomer, I want to just underscore one thing I heard you say, which is that in my experience, as much as I've come to understand and work this process, there have been times when I've been unable to. There have been times when I've been gripped in an emotion so intense and perhaps so familiar. Perhaps the intensity is a part of the familiarity because it's going way, way, way back to this childhood experience, that all of my affirmations, all of my intention settings do not seem at the moment to make any difference. Correct. And so then that's when I say to myself, okay, I give myself permission to feel stuck.
Yes.
And what that does is that at the very least, that brings me self-acceptance. And self-acceptance is also where I'm wanting to be. Nothing's wrong implies radical self-acceptance. If there's nothing wrong with me, then I accept myself just the way I am, no matter what's going on. Mm-hmm. And that is, for me, the opening to love, the divine love that loves its creation no matter what the creation's doing, because it's all part of itself. It's just all one thing going on.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
So on that profound note, we're coming to the end of our time together. Any last thoughts, last minute thoughts that you'd like to share?
This is, if the newcomer is listening to this and you're confused, that's okay, because what we've been talking about is outside of your frame of reference. And for you to either expect yourself to understand or get it is a process. So confusion brings more longing for clarity. Look to, I don't know, we've got a lot of meetings going on that you can attend. I'm starting a meeting in February 20th on Saturday morning. There's avenues. There's ACA 12-step meetings. Give Marty or me a call to kind of see where you're at, or refer you to a place you can go.
Our contact information will be on the screen at the end of the podcast, so please feel free to reach out if you'd like to experience the group meetings, besides the one John's starting next month. Depending on when this is actually broadcast, it might be this month. But we're talking February, but we have 2 ongoing meetings that are on Zoom here in Sacramento, but they're obviously international. We've had somebody show up from Dubai in one of them. They're at 6:30. There's a 6:30 meeting on Monday nights and Thursday nights this is all Pacific time. There's a new men's meeting, men only, Tuesday nights at 6 o'clock Pacific time. So contact information or get in touch with me and I'll be happy to send you the invite to the Zoom meeting. And the information on John's upcoming meeting will be provided when it's available. But if you want to get in touch with John or me, either way, that our contact information will be available at the end of the podcast. Also, if there's something you'd like for John to discuss and address, got a question you'd like us to answer, please feel free to let us know also in the email contact at the end of the podcast.
Very
So
good.
John, this is closing out January already.
Wow.
And so next time we talk, it'll be the month of February. And as always, I'm grateful to you for everything that you taught me and for the commitment that you made to create a world where what's your current one? I was going to say when a man walks in the room, people feel safe. I don't know if that's still your current one.
Yeah, that's pretty close. Create a world where whenever a woman sees a man, she feels safe.
There you go. And I intend to create a world of joy, peace, freedom, and community.
There you go.
So thank you, John. And talk to you next week.
You got it. Thank you, Marty.